Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into something that's pretty relevant, I think, to a lot of people. We're looking at porn addiction and specifically a Reddit discussion on the topic.
Yeah, this is an area I think that's often surrounded by a lot of shame and misunderstanding. So, I'm really glad we're going to be talking about this today.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as we were looking at this Reddit discussion, one of the things that really jumped out at me was just how many people are struggling silently.
Absolutely. And one of the things that's important to keep in mind as we kind of go through this material is that, we really need to approach this topic with sensitivity and a focus on understand of, the psychology and the neurology at play here.
Yeah, so to kind of jump right in, one of the users in this discussion described their addiction cycle with porn like this. You watch video after video out of compulsion, not desire. You feel trapped. You can't get out. You can't stop. And that really stood out to me.
Well, and I think what's so interesting here is this really isn't just about porn. This is really a hallmark of addiction of any kind. Whether we're talking about substance abuse or gambling or even, excessive social media use, the brain's reward system really gets hijacked and the behavior escalates despite the consequences.
So it's not really about the content itself, but more about this deeper neurological process that's happening.
Exactly. And with porn specifically, we're talking about dopamine, right? The neurotransmitter that's associated with pleasure and reward. And so porn, can trigger this huge surge of dopamine and that reinforces the behavior. But the problem is over time, you need more and more stimulation to get that same effect.
So it's like your brain is getting desensitized to that dopamine rush. You need more intense content to actually feel anything.
Yeah, and it's not even just about the sexual pleasure. This desensitization can actually spill over into other areas of life. So, things that, used to bring you joy, hobbies or relationships, even food sometimes, it just doesn't do it for you anymore. And this state of anhedonia, where you're struggling to find pleasure in anything is, a classic symptom of addiction.
Wow, I never really thought about it like that. So it's not just about watching too much porn, but about how it's actually rewiring your brain's reward system and impacting your ability to experience pleasure in general.
Precisely. And, that's why understanding the neuroscience of this is so crucial. It helps us to see that this really isn't about willpower or morality. It's about a very real, neurological process that can happen to anyone.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And it actually makes me think about some of the other users who mentioned the more subtle addictions. They may not be watching, super extreme content, but it's still impacting their lives negatively.
Absolutely. And addiction isn't always about the substance or the behavior itself. It's about the impact it has on your life, right? So if you find yourself prioritizing porn over other things that are important to you, if it's causing you distress or if it's, affecting your relationships, then it's worth, seeking help.
And that actually brings us to another point that a lot of users brought up, and that's the impact that this has on relationships. There were so many comments about feeling disconnected from their partners struggling with intimacy, even experiencing erectile dysfunction.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. If you're constantly, exposed to these, highly stimulating, often unrealistic portrayals of sex, it can really skew your expectations and make it, really difficult to connect with a real person.
And one user actually said, I feel like my sexuality isn't as clear anymore. It's almost like the porn is distorting their understanding of, what healthy sexuality even is.
That's a crucial point, and it really highlights, the need for open conversations about sex and relationships, both, within ourselves and with our partners.
Now there's one comment that really stood out to me, and this user said, I can't even enjoy my favorite video games anymore. There's this constant feeling in the back of my head that needs to be satisfied.
Yeah, that speaks to the, really intrusive nature of, of addiction. It can really hijack your attention. It makes it difficult to focus on anything else. And it can even rob you of the thing that you used to enjoy. And that's why seeking help early on is so crucial. It's about recognizing those patterns and reclaiming, your control, before the addiction really takes over your life.
Absolutely. And it's like that old saying, addiction is when one becomes need. You lose that ability to choose. And speaking of losing control, several users mentioned, porn-induced erectile dysfunction, or PIED, and one user said they could only achieve an erection while watching porn. Is there any truth to that?
It's a complex issue, but research is starting to suggest a link between, excessive porn consumption and erectile dysfunction, particularly in younger men. And it goes back to that desensitization we were talking about. Your brain becomes accustomed to a certain level of stimulation, and it can be difficult to respond to real life encounters.
So you're essentially rewiring your brain's arousal pathways?
Yeah, the brain is incredibly adaptable, which is amazing, for learning and growth. But it also means that, our habits and behaviors can physically alter our neural circuitry. So in the case of PIED, this constant bombardment of highly stimulating visuals, can make it harder to achieve an erection without that specific type of stimulation.
Wow, that's pretty scary. I mean, it makes you wonder about the long-term consequences. Not just for individuals, but for society as a whole. If we're growing up with this, constant access to hyper-stimulating content, how is that going to impact our relationships, our ability to connect with each other on a deeper level?
Yeah, that's a huge question and one that we're only beginning to grapple with, but it really underscores, the importance of education and open dialogue. We need to be talking about healthy sexuality, about the potential risks of, excessive porn use, and about the importance of seeking help when needed.
And it seems like the Reddit community is playing a role in that, at least in terms of providing support. A lot of users were, offering encouragement and advice to those who are struggling.
Yeah, that's a powerful reminder that, no one is alone in this. There's a whole community of people who understand what you're going through and who can offer support and guidance. And of course, professional help is essential.
Speaking of professional help, one user mentioned that they felt, disgusted with themselves for how weak-willed they were. And I think that sense of shame is a huge barrier for people, seeking help.
Absolutely. We need to shift away from this idea that, addiction is a moral failing. It's a health issue and it needs to be treated as such. Seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness.
Okay, there's one more comment I want to bring up before we move on. This user compared their porn addiction to the bizarre addictions you see on those reality TV shows like My Strange Addiction. And they said they could spend hours watching but wouldn't even feel aroused. It's almost like the sexual aspect becomes irrelevant.
That's so interesting because it really challenges the assumption that, porn addiction is all about sexual gratification. It could be about escapism, it could be about numbing out difficult emotions, or even just a way to, fill a void. And that's why, understanding those underlying psychological mechanisms is so important. It's not just about the content, it's about what's driving the behavior.
So it's like what need is the addiction fulfilling?
Exactly. And until you address, that underlying need, it's going to be very difficult to break free from the addiction.
This whole conversation has been incredibly eye-opening. It makes you think about the role of technology in our lives and how easily those lines can get blurred between, healthy use and addiction. What are some things people can do to prevent these types of issues from developing in the first place?
That's a great question. I think it starts with awareness. We need to be mindful of our technology, use set boundaries, and be honest with ourselves about how it's impacting our lives. It's also important to cultivate healthy coping mechanisms for stress and difficult emotions, so we're not relying on technology to numb out or escape.
Like instead of reaching for your phone when you're feeling stressed, maybe go for a walk, talk to a friend, or engage in a hobby you enjoy.
Exactly. It's about finding healthy ways to connect with yourself and the world around you.
And for those who are already struggling with porn addiction, what's the first step towards recovery?
The first step is acknowledging, that you have a problem and reaching out for help. There are therapists who specialize in addiction. There are support groups, both online and in person, and even apps, that can help you track your progress and stay accountable.
There's also a lot of helpful information online. You can find articles, videos, and even podcasts like this one that can, help you understand what you're going through and find resources for support.
And remember, recovery is a journey, not a destination. There will be setbacks and challenges along the way, but with the right support and a commitment to change, it's absolutely possible to reclaim your life.
That's such an important message. And on that note, we want to encourage everyone listening to subscribe to Voices of the Soul and check out the Shauna Polich YouTube channel for more insightful deep dives into topics like this.
We're here to explore the complexities of the human experience, and we believe that knowledge is power.
We love diving deep into these important conversations with you. It's been a really, really heavy conversation, but so important. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, just know that you're not alone, and there is help available. But before we wrap up, there's one more comment I want to touch on. This user wrote, "I've tried quitting a bunch of times and failed. Makes me feel even more pathetic."
Yeah, and relapses are a normal part of recovery. It doesn't mean you're weak or that you'll never be free from the addiction. It's important to view them as learning opportunities, to figure out what triggers, led to the relapse and how to better manage those triggers in the future.
So instead of getting discouraged, use those moments to gain insights and adjust your approach.
Exactly. Recovery isn't linear, it's a process and it takes time and patience and self-compassion.
Well said, and I think that's a perfect note to end on. Remember, if you're struggling with porn addiction, you're not alone. There is hope and there is help available.
Absolutely. And even if you're not struggling personally, I think we can all benefit from being more mindful of our relationship with technology and how it impacts our lives.
That's so true. It's been a fascinating deep dive into a complex topic. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the neuroscience of addiction to the personal stories of, those struggling with it. Thanks for joining us on this journey.
It's been a pleasure. And remember, knowledge is power. The more we understand about these issues, the better equipped we are to make healthy choices for ourselves and support those around us.
If you found this conversation helpful, please subscribe to Voices of the Soul and check out the Shauna Pullidge YouTube channel for more insightful deep dives into a variety of topics. And remember, you're not alone. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time.